Hey everybody, welcome to the ABC of CBD live on Men's Radio. If you're watching us on the Men's Radio website, incredible. If you're watching us on Facebook, click like. If you're watching us on the YouTube channel, hit subscribe and breathe. Thank you so much to everyone who's joined us over the last year. We're episode 53 now. We've just broken into a brand new year. And as you can tell, we're missing two things. We're missing Russ and we're missing my beard. Beard will come back, so will Russ. So it's all good, guys. It's just a couple of weeks where he's been absent due to health issues. Before I move on with the show, we're going to play a quick word from the sponsor. So let's just do that, and then I can just ramble. I'm sure you've heard before that good quality CBD needs to be really, really expensive. This is the new view of CBD. A product created by users for users. A product at an affordable price, available everywhere, at any time, at the simple click of a button. Just CBD and MCT oil. No additives, no preservatives, and no flavor enhancers. It's a simple subscription-based service. The cleanest possible CBD delivered to your door for the lowest possible price. Your product, your rights for the lowest possible price. So I'm pretty sure that's the first time I've watched that video and it's not been like a mirror looking back at me. So as I said, welcome to the ABC of CBD. We're episode 53. We are live every Thursday night on Men's Radio at 6 p.m. So if you actually do enjoy catching up with these shows, you ever want to get involved live, write some comments and chat with us a little bit, feel free to go onto the Men's Radio website or Men's Radio station and just listen to us live. Our special guest today is a man by the name of Guy Coxall. He is actually his third time on the show with us. Episode 53, we're calling The Highway Code, Medical Prescriptions and Vehicular Restrictions. Going to give my little brief introduction as I always do, and then we're going to bring on the guest. And yeah, just thank you so much to everyone who's joined us. And I really look forward to having another amazing year with you guys. And also thank you to Sina, our producer. He's incredible. He is the man behind all of this mystery and he makes all of this stuff happen. So thank you so much, Sina. So today we are joined once again by Guy Coxall discussing his new report and a growing issue in the UK medical cannabis market, mainly focused around cannabis and driving. We briefly touched upon this subject the last time Guy was on the show, but with increased awareness surrounding cannabis and an increase in medical consumption, we thought it would be good to broach this subject again in more detail. For those of you who know Guy, you will know that he's absolutely great. For those of you who don't know Guy, here is a little introduction. Guy loves the details. It's his things. It's his thing. A lot of people love research. They like to learn. They like to dive deep into the detail, deep into the facts to get a real understanding of things and how they actually work. Guy takes this to the whole next level. He literally loves it so much that he literally writes reports just for fun. So this is the third time we've had him on discussing the third report that he's... Sorry, guys. Don't know what's happened there. I do apologize. So... I really do apologize about that. So Guy literally loves this and he writes reports just for fun. That being said, this report's a little bit shorter than his last report and it's not about quantity, it's about quality, and it really was an awesome read. For the last year, the idea of supporting drivers found guilty of cannabis intoxication who were then criminalized, labeled, fined, and more often than not victimized due to their new criminal label has been at the forefront of Guy's mind and the tip of Guy's pen, especially when they're medical cannabis users. Guy is not defending the rebellious rule breakers. He's defending those who have no other option, the helpless patients who have found their salvation, who are now being persecuted for it. The fact of the matter is prescriptions protect patients, but prescriptions are expensive. They are getting cheaper, but they are expensive. If a patient doesn't have a prescription, they can be penalized as a criminal. And to be honest, even if a patient does have a prescription, they can be penalized as a criminal. So if a patient is poor, they're more likely to not have a private prescription. Therefore, they're more likely to fall into the category of becoming a criminal. And it's just wrong. Money should not be the factor which makes medicine a medicine. There is also something not right about the way police test for cannabis intoxication. Testing leads to far higher conviction rates of criminality than necessary. Medical cannabis patients should not be getting penalized for their medicine. That is what Guy is writing for, and that is what Guy is fighting for. Guy has offered guidance to hundreds of people through his reports. He has supported those who cannot support themselves and who are not educated the way he is. That is what it's all about. It's all about understanding, education, knowing. It's how you gain an edge. It's exactly what Guy has been doing. He's given himself that edge to help others navigate their rights, their human rights, effectively. The main issue is that cannabis has been medically legalized and governing bodies don't seem to know, and they don't really seem to care. Cannabis is legal. However, people are still being persecuted as if it is illegal. When rules change, it is important for the new rules to be followed. However, with cannabis, the old rules still seem to hold power. When laws change, new laws are the laws to be followed. However, with cannabis, the old laws still seem to be followed. Why is education and understanding? This is why education and understanding of the greater world of cannabis is so important. It's why it's been at the forefront of Guy's activities for the last few years. He's a sharer, he's a carer, and he does it all for all of you. So I think let's bring on Guy and let's continue the show. Sorry about that little technical issue at the start.
That's cool. Great to be back on.
Decent introduction.
Very good. Yeah, lovely. Thank you. I'm not sure how much I enjoy writing reports and reading lots of
you freaking love it.
Research.
You love it. You love it. And the strange thing is you talk about how you don't like it. I don't know if I really like it. You do it all the time. As in, there's no way in hell you would, unless you're a sadomasochist, which is completely cool. There is no way in hell that you would subject yourself to such torture and pain unless you loved it so much. And the detail which you manage to absorb, the difference between a lot of people out there, what happens is they'll do the research to write the paper. I feel like you do the research to learn and you write the paper because you have learned. You're not writing, you're not reading just to write. You're not internalizing these thoughts, regurgitating them and then forgetting them. I feel like you really do immerse yourself in this culture of law and the inequalities around it, which enable you to kind of have this extremely rare view. You know, you have this incredible view actually, and this incredible stance where you help people protect themselves with knowledge and with information. It's amazing what you do, and you love it. Don't argue with me. You absolutely love it. No, seriously, it was a great read, man. It was a great read. Like,
well, what I love about this one is it's short. You know, like my last report was about 90 pages. I think the first one was about 70. And you know, that's a lot of reading for people to digest. We're getting it down to 20 pages, which is the new report. I'm really pleased with that.
It's also, listen, your last report was written with Phil Monk. Okay, God bless Phil Monk. Okay, God bless him with all his heart, but he loves to talk, which means that his energy, that you know, the over informative way in which he discusses, that shone through in the report. Now, it wasn't a bad report. It read fantastically, but it's what I said 5 minutes ago. I feel like this report is pure factual, and I feel like out of the 3 reports I've read, the first one I felt like I was reading and listening to Guy's voice. The second one I felt like I was listening to the voice of the community, and this one I feel like I'm reading a scientific paper. And I kind of, as I was reading it, I was like, well, fact, and it was quite, in a nice way, quite beautiful, because there's no opinion there, which means that no one can really argue with it. It all seemed very scientific based, and the amount of evidence, you know, that the evidence per page was a hell of a lot more substantial than on previous reports. So I feel like you've done something very special here. I just want to throw that out there, and I really enjoyed reading it, and it absorbed very easily. I didn't find it too complicated.
Good, thank you. Good feedback. Yeah, I mean, it's taken me a year to put this together. You know, 95% of it is research, and you know, actually writing the report is done in a week. But yeah, it's something I'd never expected, really. I think when I did the first 2 reports, it was all mainly about generic legislation, the Misuse of Drugs Act, and so on.
The bigger picture, so big. The picture was so big.
Yeah, but last year, you know, around this time last year, a friend of mine, basically, you know, she was having problems because she'd been stopped by the police with THC in her system, medical user, She was, what can I do? So I said, well, I'll have a look at it and maybe be able to support you in some capacity. And once I started reading into it, I was just flabbergasted. I couldn't believe that they changed the law in 2015, because prior to 2015, the police had to prove impairment. And that was usually by what's called a field impairment test, where they get you to touch their nose and walk in a straight line. We've all seen it on the films in America. So, and that's a good way to do it. If you're impaired, I'm not going to help. I've got no time for anybody who gets behind the wheel of a motor vehicle, which is a very dangerous thing, if they're drunk or stoned or on anything else,
That was my first point, actually, I wanted to say, as I've actually got written here. It is important to mention you are not pro driving intoxicated, and you reference this several times in the report. Dangerous behavior deserves to get punished. It deserves to have the legal book thrown at it. You are not defending the rights of stoners or alcoholics. You're not defending the rights of you're defending the rights of these people to drive. What you're defending the rights of people who are so cannabis patients,
responsible users.
Yeah, responsible users. And it's the idea that cannabis stays in your system for such a long period of time, right? That's the main idea, that I could smoke a joint on Monday and on Wednesday I can get stopped by the police having not consumed anything since Monday. I am obviously sober, but I could theoretically fail a swab test, get in trouble for consuming cannabis before driving a car, be in trouble for being intoxicated. Why? Because cannabis stays in your system for such prolonged periods of time. And that's what you're arguing. It's arguing this idea that the science which incriminates these individuals, mainly cannabis patients and people on medical prescriptions and medical users who are responsible users, the testing parameters are not designed with logic in mind. The testing parameters are designed to increase levels of criminality and to increase, you could call it, figures of cannabis consumption. It's more of a test to find out if you have consumed cannabis in the last week, as opposed to a test to see if you have consumed cannabis and you are intoxicated.
Yeah. But of course, a law has to be based on, criminal intent. Have you potentially caused harm to somebody? Are you a danger on the road? And if they are a danger on the road, yeah, absolutely, they should have their license taken away.
Hell yeah. Or if you're driving dangerously.
But what you're finding here is that they purposely changed the law, and it even says in the legislation and in the Crown Prosecution Service website that they changed the law to increase prosecutions, which is financial, because before they changed it, there was about 70% prosecution rate. But also as a deterrent effect, which we've already seen with the Misuse of Drugs Act, doesn't work, because more and more people take cannabis, it increases over a period of time. So it's not going to do any of those things. It's not increasing road safety because they're not getting any evidence of impairment. All they're doing is relying entirely on a blood test, which will show that they've got more than 2 micrograms of THC in their system.
But the funny thing, you can get from passive smoking.
You can get that from passive smoking. But the weird thing is that it's been found through global research that the blood test is completely inadmissible for correlating to impairment. So even somebody who came out at 1 microgram per liter of blood, if they're not used to cannabis, could be seriously impaired. But they would get off because they're below that per se zero tolerance limit. Somebody who's over 20 micrograms per limit, which is what we've actually seen through our own research, is perfectly fit to drive, perfectly non-intoxicated, but because they use it medicinally on a daily basis, they've always got that in the system because it's a cannabinoids are fats and they store in your fat and they release slowly. So, there's no evidence of any harm. And for there to be a just and fair trial, they have to provide evidence that you've done something wrong, not just consumed an illicit substance sometime in the last month.
So let's roll it back a little bit. Okay, let's roll it back a little bit because I've actually got questions to dive into this and they're a little bit further on. So what I wanted to ask is, let's start from the beginning. So a friend of yours last year got in trouble. Okay, and she is a medical cannabis user. Is she a prescription holder?
Not at the time of arrest, but she is now.
Right. So she was a prescription holder, and she reached out to you for help because she had cannabis in her system. She was caught driving. Is that the main reason why you started compiling this research? Because you realized that she can't be the only one. That's the main reason why you started this. Now, so what happened with her in court, if that might be asking? Sorry if I just I just want to kind of just get back onto that story. What happened with her in court in the end?
Well, what happened? I helped her prepare her case file, so I spent a lot of time putting together all the research. It was a big file with all the evidence, basically saying that although she didn't have a prescription at the time of arrest, because if she did have that, she'd have a medical defense. Because she didn't have that, it was due to mainly financial restraints. She couldn't afford £1,000 at the time for a medical prescription. By the time she actually got a prescription, it had reduced 70% down to £300 a month. So she was able to afford it then. But she shouldn't be persecuted because it's financial discrimination and medical discrimination. So that was, and also it's a breach of human rights, which I'm sure we'll come to in the future of this talk. But so that was the main concept. So we took that to the magistrate's court. She represented herself in court because it's the only way you can actually challenge the law and human rights and so on. She did a damn good job, and it was like watching television, sat at the back of the court, watching her cross-examine the police officer, who incidentally didn't even know the law had changed since 2018 for medical cannabis, didn't know it was legal. He said that on the stand.
That's crazy.
Yeah, the judge was very sympathetic and really got what we were saying. And he actually said, I don't really want to have to deal with this. Really, you need to take this to a higher court if you're going to challenge the law and human rights. And what was really amusing was the judge even came out and said, have you looked at Article 6 of the European Convention on Human Rights? And we were like, no. So I had a quick Google. It's the right to a fair trial. So the judge was even saying that it wasn't a fair trial because there wasn't the evidence to back it up.
And the woman's defending herself against a witch hunt, basically. So she's defending herself against a much stronger, much more you could call it a much more equipped team who are holding evidence against her, and the grounding for the evidence is not even substantiated anyway. So what happens is a completely unfair trial. That's incredible. Did the judge know that cannabis had been medicalized?
He did, yes.
And did the judge take sympathy to her financial situation? Did he understand? Does he understand the financial parameters which stand in the way of so many people getting a prescription?
He did, but only because of the case file we'd put together that he read.
That's fair.
What was very amusing was the woman from the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service. She was asked to look at something by the judge in the file, and she went out into a fury and said, "Oh, I only got this evidence this morning. It's like 1,000 pages." So the lady, the defendant, it was really funny because she basically said to the judge, "I'm sorry, but I handed this to the prosecution service 6 months ago." And the judge was, "Oh yeah, I can certainly believe that." So he knows how it goes. Unfortunately, he did have to prosecute her. He did have to give her a 12-month ban and a minimum fine, which quite funnily was £420.
I read that. So do you reckon he did that as like a fuck you?
I just don't know, but it was amusing.
It's so funny because when I read that, I was like, come on, that's definitely a little bit of because I actually wrote that down. That was subject B or subject C, and I remember I was just reading. I think that's very funny. It's very, very, very funny. So this woman, she's a branded criminal.
Well, she's got a criminal record. It will stay on her license for at least 11 years. So now, let's say she goes for a job interview. She's a criminal. Yeah, if she was to go for a teaching job or something, for instance, where you get a background check, it will come up on her background check that she's been prosecuted for drug driving. Can't go to America.
Can't go to Australia.
No.
Can't go to the Philippines. Can't go to Southeast Asia. Can't go to Dubai. Can't go to the Middle East. So basically, she's not in jail, but she got in trouble. Now, if she had a cannabis prescription from the start, would she have got away with it? As in, has anyone with a cannabis prescription? No, because it's still, she's not getting in trouble for possession. She's got in trouble for driving under the influence, because this is very important.
Not under the influence, with THC in her blood.
In her system, okay. But I mean, so she hasn't got in trouble for being caught with a massive bag of cannabis. She's got in trouble for internal possession. So somewhere inside of her body, there is a small trace amount of cannabis, and this trace amount of cannabis has got her in trouble, which she admitted to being a medical cannabis user. Now, that internal possession, okay, so like having these micrograms, these micrograms of cannabinoids in your system has given her a criminal record. It's a little bit mental when you think about it. Did she have a car crash?
No.
Did she kill anyone?
No.
Did she injure anyone?
Her driving was perfectly fine.
Why did she get pulled over in the first place?
The police officer actually said her car was marked, so somebody had obviously dobbed her in, said she uses cannabis, and it came up on the license plate, which happens quite a lot, actually.
Absolutely insane. It's so sad, because the fact of the matter is she's not a criminal. And now for her to be labeled as a criminal means that her life journey is now going to be, well, riddled with that label. It's what happens. Unfortunately, as soon as you're a criminal, life becomes harder. And she's now labeled as a criminal. She's got all of these, all of these burdens which have just basically been dropped on her plate, when actually she's not a criminal. It's. I would understand if she had, if she was like actually impaired and she got in a crash and she hurt someone, fine. Or if she had a large amount of cannabis on her. I always thought internal possession didn't count in the UK. Like in Hawaii, if you smoke crack, all right, you can go to jail for 6 months or a year for the crack, which is theoretically in your body. Okay, they call it internal possession. Now, I don't know if you ever watched Dog the Bounty Hunter, but Dog the Bounty Hunter, 95% of the people he actually brought in were always for internal possession. He never actually found any like drugs on them. It's what's in their system. I think it's a little bit mental. I think it's a little bit crazy, considering like if with opioids and benzodiazepam and all these other prescription pharmaceutical drugs, which have a far worse intoxication effect and a far worse, you call it, they definitely screw people up a hell of a lot more than a joint. But theoretically, you can drive a car on benzodiazepams. It's not recommended, but you can drive a car, get in a car crash, and you still wouldn't lose your license. And you still wouldn't get in trouble. You could probably get in a car crash and probably injure someone and probably still not go to jail unless the police were called. Do you understand what I mean? You're actually dangerous driving, but you get away with that. It's a little bit mental. Is this true, Guy?
Yeah.
Is this I
was just as shocked as you, mate. It blew my mind.
Like I said, if someone was if she was holding, all right, I would get it, because I understand someone getting arrested for possession, and I understand the idea of getting arrested for possession in your car. A and B go together. Might as well punish someone more. I understand that. But if she didn't have anything on her, then what made them even want to swab test her in the first place? Like, what makes someone, as in order to swab test someone, you need to be seen to be doing something wrong, right? As in, if I'm walking down the street, they don't just come and swab test me. They don't have the right to do that, do they? Open your mouth, let me stick this thing in there. They don't have the right to do that.
They do.
Or do they?
Yeah, they can stop. They can stop and swab anybody.
But do they not
anybody who uses cannabis recreationally or medicinally, or may not have had it for a week or had it at a party the last weekend? If the police stop you, there's a good chance if they've got a swab kit on them and they don't need any reason, they can just swab you. If that comes out positive for either cannabis or cocaine, that's it.
I always thought police needed the reason to test you. I thought we lived in a world where you got to almost be assumed of committing the crime before they can pull you through the trials.
Technically they do, but from what I've discovered of all the people I've supported and talked to, I've not come across any legitimate reason for the police to pull them.
So I think it was case study A, about the person who could just trigger something. Yeah, it was a very vulnerable person who was bullied into taking a guilty plea, which I thought was quite mean as well. I didn't think that was very nice. I didn't like that one. I thought that was quite sad. I don't like that. I don't like that. As in, don't get me wrong, if you're breaking the law, you deserve to get in trouble. But I honestly believe that everyone needs to be caught breaking the law. It's just, if not, it's just a bit like, I don't know, it's just a bit unfair, isn't it? Takes all the
It's
fun away from it.
entrapment.
It's proper entrapment. It's proper entrapment.
Yeah.
Also, let's say by this logic, okay, so my girlfriend does smoke cannabis. I do. Very often we are next to each other. She probably has trace elements in her system. She's never
She'll be over the 2 micrograms per litre. She got stopped driving.
Absolutely screwed, or walking.
Yeah.
If they wanted to screw up her life. That's mental. That's absolutely mental. Sorry, so we rambled a little bit there. So the main thing is you don't want patients to be branded as criminals when behaving logically and responsibly. All right, that's the main idea, right? How do laws governing cannabis and guidance by doctor for the consumption of cannabis contradict each other? Because you were talking about this earlier about how cannabis, when you buy prescriptions and you get your prescription for different parts of the world, it comes with different instruction labels.
Yes.
So
Yes.
Sorry.
This is something I came across through the research. I realized that depending on the country of origin, where the medicine comes from, so for instance, if it comes from Israel, the Noidex, on the labeling, it will actually say, do not drive or operate heavy machinery. Now, if it comes from other countries like Canada, it says, do not drive if impaired. Now, all the UK guidance, both the government, the Medical Cannabis Clinics Society and the Medical Cannabis Clinics, all of their guidance is do not drive if impaired, which makes sense. And it's the same for other things like morphine.
Basically, it's not about internal possession. It's about actually feeling the feeling of intoxication, right? So it's about if you feel high, do not drive. Or if you think that you might be high, do not drive. It's not the idea that you have cannabis in your system, you've smoked a joint within the last 6 months, you're not allowed to drive for the next 6 months. Why? Because it could be in your system. That's not the laws. So, sorry, carry on. Talk.
Yeah, so you've got the medical defense in the Act. So the things that the criteria you have to fit is you have to own a legal prescription, you have to follow the practitioner's guidance, and you have to follow the manufacturer's guidance. So all the medical cannabis patients in the UK, about 10,000 of them at the present, all fit the first 2 definitions. But depending on the origin of their product, they might not fit the last definition. Now, if that goes to court, then they will lose the right to that medical defense and they will be criminalized and lose their license. And that's 2,000 plus out of the 10,000. I'm not sure the exact figures. So, even medical cannabis patients, depending on their prescription, could end up in court and lose their license. So we took this to, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, because it's like, so cannabis patients are allowed to consume cannabis every day. So a medical cannabis patient, someone with a legal prescription, they're legally allowed to consume cannabis every single day. Now, a medical cannabis patient is also legally allowed to possess a driving license. There's no rule out there that says as soon as you're a medical cannabis patient, you have to lose your medical cannabis driving license. Now, if a medical cannabis patient is swabbed within 3 days of them consuming their medical cannabis, which is legal, and they're legally allowed to drive their car because they've got a legal license too, they will still fail that swab. Yeah. Then what happens? Are they then now a criminal? So even though you've got
the swab isn't,
you're still driving under the influence of a substance that is theoretically banned when driving. So theoretically, even though you've got your legal prescription and you've got your legal license to drive, you're never going to be able to have both, because at any moment of time they could just swab you and you will fail, which means you will lose your license.
Yeah. We have to get it right about under the influence. People who consume cannabis, anybody who consumes cannabis, generally the psychoactive effects have dissipated between 2 and 4 hours after use if smoked. It could be 6 to 8 hours if you consume it internally, but it can be less. Everybody's different, body weight, your tolerance. There's lots of different factors.
Smoking, etc., etc.
There's people who can take a lot of cannabis, get straight behind the wheel, and they're perfectly fine. There's other people who wouldn't even dare to go behind the wheel for at least 6 or 7 hours. So everybody knows their own bodies and they know if they're able to drive or not. It's not like alcohol where you get all confident and I can drive and
like, before two drinks you're like, I shouldn't drive, and after 3 you're like, I'm fine.
Yeah.
I'm fine. Okay, listen, mate, I bet you another drink. I could drive home safe. You know what I mean? That's what happens.
Yeah.
No, what I'm saying is I'm not trying to be facetious here, but I mean, I'm just trying to figure out like how vulnerable a cannabis patient actually is. So you have a legal license to consume cannabis. Okay, you are legally allowed to do it. We know that unfortunately these swab tests are not legitimate. They don't measure levels of toxicity. They measure levels of blood of trace blood elements. Okay, that's what they look for.
Yeah.
So theoretically, all legal medical cannabis patients, people with legal prescriptions who are smoking legally every single day, a prescription which they buy through these private bodies out there, at any moment of time, they're theoretically liable to lose their license. And if they do get swabbed and it is found to have cannabis in their system, a court can still take away their license, give them a 12-month fine, give them a 12-month ban, give them a 500 quid fine, and theoretically they haven't actually broken the law.
There's two elements to this situation when it comes to medical patients with a prescription. One is the standardization of labeling. So now I did a presentation about this with the Cannabis Industry Council a couple of weeks ago in London, and now that they're working internally to actually get standardization on the labeling for guidance for driving across the board. So soon that issue will be defunct. So they'll all have the medical defense. They'll all be safe from that. The second issue is
you're still not allowed to smoke and drive.
You're not allowed to smoke anyway, technically, with a medical prescription.
Right,
you
so
have to vape
and
it.
drive.
You can vape it and drive, as long as you're not impaired.
Fine. Okay, that's cool. Okay, I just want to make sure that patient. I want to make sure that patients aren't getting themselves into a trap where they're legally allowed to be a patient, but the rest of their life ends up falling at the wayside because they're going to illegally be everything else. Well, you're legally allowed to be a patient, then you're not legally allowed to drive. You're not legally allowed to do this. You're not legally allowed to do that. You can't legally do this or that. You can't legally go to a school or whatever other rules they want to throw out there. Do you understand what I mean? So I just wanted to make sure that patients are actually getting taken care of, because the one thing you don't want to hear is they get given a flag in one hand and then they get another flag taken away in another. Do you understand what I mean?
You've got to think there's a lot of patients with serious conditions, like with pain and all sorts of, multiple sclerosis, all of these different things. Without their cannabis medication, they're probably in a worse state to drive. So actually, the cannabis can actually improve their driving. And a lot of the research actually shows that people on cannabis are actually better drivers. They're more careful. So it's a complicated thing. And, there's got to be a certain element of, trust in the person who's taking the medicine to know their own bodies and know their own abilities, and not be silly. But the other issue, which is really important, is the police, because the police don't seem to know or care that the law has changed. And one of the people I supported, when he was stopped by the police, they stopped him saying his car smelt of cannabis, and they were following him in a van. There was no possible way they could have smelt cannabis from his car, not unless they've been genetically modifying police officers with police dogs, so they've got an acute sense of smell. So straight away they pulled him. He had dreadlocks, right? Okay, I've got disabilities. I've got a prescription. Oh, there's no such thing as legal cannabis in the UK, the officer said.
When was this?
Sorry?
When was this?
Liverpool.
No, but when?
When?
Yeah.
Quite a few months ago, but it's gone to court. And
no, but in 2021.
I think it might have been late 2020.
Fine, but still 2 years after medical cannabis was stamped and sealed in the UK. Fine.
The fact that this person with a medical cannabis prescription actually offered his prescription and said, look into it, do your due diligence, which is the oath of an officer. He refused, and even months later, even all the way to court, he refused to do his due diligence and even look to see if the law changed. And this person, he had his DNA taken, his fingerprints, his photo taken, treated like a criminal, spent several hours in his cell, and had to go all through the stress of court when he's already got conditions that he's got to deal with. Now, this is unacceptable.
You mentioned this, and you also mentioned this in your report and on the phone about how there's been no effort to educate the police on this change of law. And it's why in my introduction I said, new rules should take precedence over the old rules, and the new laws are the laws which we should be following, not the old laws. Now, you mentioned about how police are not being educated into cannabis. Actually, the amount of police officers who are unaware of cannabis law changes is substantial. And you also mentioned about the fact that a lot of police officers and police commissioners who were at one moment pro-cannabis, or at least starting to kind of reduce the anger and the animosity towards cannabis, they've kind of stepped off a little bit, and they're being a bit more, what's the word, a bit more difficult. And it seems to be there's almost like a reversing of culture, as opposed to the culture being, going in the same direction as medicalization in the UK. It seems to be going in a different direction, which is a bit of a shame.
Yeah. So so I think the only way we can do this is education is key. So when I did my presentation for the Cannabis Industry Council the other week, I suggested that a course is developed for police officers across the country to educate them primarily on the change of legislation, but also give them, an understanding of, what cannabis is, the possible harms, the possible benefits, and get rid of that stigma a little bit. I think that's the most important thing. If we can, educate the police to give them an understanding of the importance, they might actually be more lenient with people who maybe grow a few plants for their own medicine because they've got certain conditions, or they're in possession. All police officers have a certain amount of discretion, and they can use that discretion. So
if discretion could be paired with empathy and a little bit of education, you might actually have someone who's going on the streets and actually almost protecting the best interests of people, as opposed to enforcing a whole bunch of laws which they probably don't actually agree with anyway. The difference between, a police officer not knowing something, like you said, ignorance is no excuse for not following the law. If I drive down the street and I don't know it's 50 miles an hour and I'm driving at 120, I'm losing my license. There's no reason the same laws shouldn't apply to police. If I'm driving down the street and it is 120 and the policeman thinks it's 50, he can't take away my license and crush my car. I'm driving somewhere where it's legal. It is 120. Just the fact that he doesn't know that because he's ignorant to the fact that the laws have changed on the roads, I shouldn't be penalized for that. And it's not fair that many patients are being penalized for ignorance, which is it's not right at all. It's not right at all.
There's also the benefit to the police. The police, they have to do their due diligence. They have to respect human rights and so on and so on. It's all part of their oath. And if they don't do that and they proceed to an unlawful arrest and false imprisonment, they're liable in a civil court, which is what's happening now. The young lad I talked to before, he's now going to sue the cops, the police station, the police force. Amazing. So, and this is going to happen more and more. And Outlaw is doing the same. He's prosecuting lots of police. So it's in the benefit of the police as well to actually take on this training and actually, do their due diligence, understand the law, and understand the complexities that medical cannabis users have from day to day.
There are also there are far bigger threats to the UK than a couple of fibromyalgia and epileptic patients. You know what I mean? Sitting in their own room, suffering, crying themselves to sleep at night. Just want to say something. They are not terrorists. They are not, public enemy number one. And I also think you meet some of these policemen and you can see in their eyes, are like, why do I have to do this? I'm so sure the policeman who put the cuffs on Philip Anthony Bevington did not go home and pat himself on the back that night. And if he did, he doesn't deserve to be a policeman. Because fact of the matter is, there's one thing, like upholding the law.
I think he did, actually.
What?
I think he did, because he's been harassing Mr. Bevington since.
Really? You think he?
He needs to be taken down a dark alley, I think.
It's insane. Do you know what I mean? I am all for the police doing exactly what the police. I'm actually very much pro-police. I actually love the police, and to be honest with you, I'm actually quite anti-activist. So generally, if the police need to protect the world against damaging thoughts and damaging ideals, I'm actually very much pro that. I just feel like that there's there's got to be a middle ground. Like I've used this terminology before. If someone's on fire, help them put out the fire. Don't like make their situation worse. Throw gasoline on them and be like, now you're burning. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't help. It doesn't help anything. Question: if you have a criminal conviction, are you still able to get a medical cannabis prescription? Is there any sort of, does it?
I would imagine, yeah. I don't think it would affect that in
that
any
would
way.
be very sad if that happens. Do you know what I mean? I didn't know if it did happen. I was just curious.
Everyone's got a human right to health. So.
Fine. So shall we go back or shall we go forward? You've got 20 minutes left. So we kind of just took question number 16. So I've got 5 to 15 or I've got 15 to 20. I don't know which way to go. Okay, fine. Let's go back a little bit. So you were talking about with the CIC and what you want to do is you want to put effort into educating. Talking about how you want to educate police officers, but you also talked about how you want to run a course to start educating patients into better road safety, better self-analysis. You were saying about how there's got to be a protocol in place, so responsibilities seem to be taken by patients and by consumers. You mentioned that.
Yeah. So what I'm doing at the moment is I'm putting together not a report, but a paper, so a short report.
Love a report. You love a report. He loves it. He says he doesn't. He does.
Yeah, I'm putting this to. Since I did my presentation, I've had several cannabis clinics contact me saying, can we have a chat so we can get the practitioners all on the same wavelength. So I'm putting this paper together for practitioners and chemists on how to give appropriate advice to medical patients in regards to driving. And I think that will be accompanied by a patient leaflet that can go to every medical cannabis patient, because a lot of them don't even know that the law changed or even that they could be prosecuted. And when you get apprehended by the police and they swab you and all this, it's instinct just to go along with it and not just go along with it, and you end up in court, and then you're having to represent yourself, or you're having to pay thousands of pounds for a solicitor to sort out something that's not even illegal, just to defend yourself.
It's quite important we throw out this fact. So criminal convictions for cannabis driving have gone from 2,500 cases in 2015 to about 12,500 cases in 2019, 2020. Now, considering 2019, 2020 was the year of COVID, when no one drove anywhere and the numbers have increased so much, it's been like a 400, 500, 600% increase in the amount of individuals who have been persecuted for internal possession of cannabis whilst driving. It's mental. It's absolutely mental. Now, these are not.
But it's like I said before,
12,000 people getting caught. Sorry, it is. It's insane, though.
It's about increasing prosecutions, not about people's rights.
See, I remember being 15, 16 years old. I was in a friend of mine's car and we're driving home from school. And I'm not saying this is right, it was wrong, but he was smoking a joint whilst driving. And he actually got in a little crash on the way home. And a policeman showed up as he got in the crash and exhaled his joint out the window. He blew smoke into the policeman's face. I mean, you couldn't fucking write this. All right, you couldn't write this. And the policeman looked at him, and he looked at him, and he looked at me. He looked at the joint, and he said, "How many joints have you smoked before this?" And the guy looked at me. He goes, "All right, I'm shitting myself, so I'm going to be honest with you. It's the first joint I've had today." And he looked at it. He goes, "It's a big fucking joint." He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "How much of it have you smoked?" And so the policeman pulls out a Rizzler sheet and puts the joint next to the Rizzler and realizes that maybe 3 puffs are gone. And looks at him, looks at the driver and says, "Park your car up there, walk home." So that's what he says to the driver. And the rest of us were all in the car. And then he worked on the rest of us. He was like, "Do you have anything on you?" And I was like, "No." And they searched me. I had nothing on me. And they're like, "All right, you go home." So me and the driver walk around the corner and we're like, "All right, what everyone else?" Another matey turns around, says, "What do you have in the car?" And he was like, "Nothing." Had nothing in the car. Says, "All right, walk home. Go and get the bus, walk home. Go away, leave the car here. I'm going to come back here later on tonight. If the car's not here, I know where the car belongs to. I know which address it belongs to. I will arrest you. Go home." And the last guy says, "Do you have anything?" And the last guy actually had something. He said, "No." And the policeman said, "I'll give you one more chance. Do you have anything?" And he said, "No." He goes, "Someone's definitely got something. You've just rolled a joint. I haven't found a grinder. I haven't found a Rizzler. I haven't found any cannabis. if you have anything on you, you are about to get arrested. You will go to jail. I am going to destroy your life. If you tell me you have something, I'm just going to leave it. And then what you're going to do is you're going to throw it away and you're going to carry on with your life. And the guy said, no. Policeman searched him, found some cannabis, took him and arrested him. But the policeman gave him every opportunity under the sun. He gave everyone in the car every opportunity under the sun to not go to jail, to not get in trouble, because he realized, like, A, there are a bunch of kids. This was 2009, 2010. It was years ago, more. So it's 2021 now, was 16. So 15 years ago, 2006. Okay. And the way he reacted, the way the policeman handled this situation was very much like, I don't want to destroy any lives today. And I always remember at that moment, I respected that policeman because he gave 4 people a chance to not be stupid ever again. Haven't smoked a joint in a car since that day. Do you understand? I haven't wanted to. I haven't wanted to put myself in that position. And police actually have that ability to almost make the world a better place for tomorrow. Every interaction they have with an individual, they have the ability to make that person more of a law-abiding citizen, a respecter of the institution, which is the police, or they can make us hate them. I've always had a lot of respect for police. I've always felt like police have always had a lot of respect for me. And I feel like I've got lucky with the policemen I've met along the way. And if a policeman's listening to this somewhere, I just want them to know that it gave me an understanding on how to generally not piss you guys off. And I feel like that's how we build a better culture. That's how we build a better industry, is when we kind of all take care of each other. And I feel like you educating the police would really help, Guy, because it's situations like that which do kind of, they create a better cannabis culture for tomorrow, a better understanding for tomorrow.
Yeah. You've got to remember, we've had hundreds of years of propaganda, and it's generational from your grandparents all the way through to now. People are told cannabis is dangerous, it does this, it does that, it's a toxic, dangerous narcotic. And the police believe that, and they spend a hell of a lot of their time dealing with cannabis more than anything else. And, they've obviously got it ingrained in their minds, cannabis is bad. So they, probably think they're doing the right thing. But that lack of education, just being able to sway them in a training session and, get them to look at it from a different perspective could make all the difference.
1,000,000%. 1,000,000%. So let's talk about this, because I know you really enjoy this, because this is something which you talked a lot about in your presentation, is the parallels between drug and alcohol. Okay. And about the conversations between you have cases of individuals with drug impairment, cases of individuals with alcohol impairment, the scale the scale across the story, the fact that there's a lot of emphasis and energy being put onto drug driving. However, drug driving is actually 1% of cases, and alcohol driving is actually 5%. I was actually doing the math based on the figures presented. It's actually more like 0.5 and 10%, because it all like 0.5 and 5%, 1 and 10%, because you've got around 670 cases of drug driving accounts, and you've got about 6,000 cases of alcohol related driving incidents. Do you know what I'm talking about, Guy?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, there's about I think the main figure is there's about 94% of collisions which cause an injury, and this can be like minor injuries, like what is it when you get the neck brace?
Whiplash.
Whiplash, yeah. So it can be anything like that. So 94% of all cases of an accident that's caused an injury have nothing to do with alcohol or drugs. 1% are drug related, but that can include all drugs, including medicinal. It can include morphine or benzodiazepines, or the one in 2015, there was one case of a fatality relating to drug use, and that was a young lad who had 16 times the legal limit of cocaine, and he was over twice over the limit for alcohol.
Absolute lad.
And he was speeding. And he hit a couple.
I've got a question. How is he not dead before he got in the crash? That's one thing I'm just curious about. I mean, like, you have that much cocaine in your system. I mean, people have fallen with a lot less mental. So cannabis is still the highest.
I would suggest I'm trying to find a way of writing a freedom of information request in the right way to the government to try and assess, out of all the people who have been in fatal crashes since the change of law in 2015, how many of them were THC only. There were less than 5 in 2019, 1 in 2015, and it's variable the years in between. I would almost put money on it that not one of those were related to cannabis only.
But you know what always happens? You have the moron who doesn't want to let everyone know that he was doing something ridiculous whilst driving. You know, like I decided to drive with my knees and shut my eyes because I just wanted to see what it felt like. Okay, because people do that. People do that. They do crazy stuff. Turn my lights off on a road just because I want to see what it's like to drive without my lights on. People do crazy, crazy stuff behind the wheel of a car. They're probably more likely to turn around, like, swab me. Or, like, I did nothing wrong, and they'll swab them. They'll find cannabis in their system, and it's the only thing they can blame because the truth never comes out. And that's one thing which I've realized. Look, I've once again been in cars with people who do crazy stuff, and I've seen some terrible driving. Talk about like handbrake turns at 65 miles an hour around roundabouts. I mean, you're asking to die. You're asking to be stupid. Now, if you were to get in a crash there, you're not going to turn around and say I'm speeding, because then you will go to jail for dangerous driving. You might turn around and say nothing. And when they swab you, they're looking for a reason to get you in trouble. The police want a reason to take away your license, and you don't want to give them a reason. So if cannabis is that, you can always say I didn't smoke, and if you get a good enough lawyer, you might be able to defend yourself in court. It's a strange situation, Guy, but I understand what you mean. It's like we're only ever told the information that we're told about, and there's a lot of negativity put on cannabis because it is still one of the highest policed crimes. But then it's also one of the most, like we discussed this, there's like 65% of the population of the UK have tried a joint at one moment or another over the course of their lifetime. It's insanity. 2/3 of the population know what it's like to be high. And something like 8% of the population know what it's like to consume cocaine, and like 1.5% of the population,
Like
if that. Sorry?
Like Gove?
Yeah. And then 1.5% of the population like know what it's like to consume actual real drugs. Do you know what I mean? It's a little bit mental when you've got such a large proportion of people consuming something, or at least trying something. Of course, they're going to be the highest policed group. Do you know what I mean? It's like if you get 1,000 people wearing red t-shirts and 50 people wearing green, and anyone wearing a red t-shirt is going to get stopped by the police because that's just the rule today. There's going to be 20 times the amount of people, 25 times the amount of people getting stopped by the police because they're all wearing red compared to the only 50 wearing green. Do you understand the logic?
Yeah.
Is that even logical? Does that make sense? Because in here it makes sense. I just don't know if it makes sense out there.
Kind of.
Hopefully someone understood me.
I think you mentioned alcohol before, and this really intrigues me because legally you're allowed to drink alcohol and drive up to 36 micrograms per 100 ml in your blood, which is on average 2 pints of normal strength beer. So basically, they allow you, your civil right, to drink responsibly, have up to 2 pints with your lunch or something if you're at a meeting, and you can drive home without being impaired. And there's so much research that shows as the alcohol increases in your blood, so does your impairment. So once you're above that level, you are impaired. There's no way around it. The evidence is good with the blood test, and yeah, you should lose your license. Where with cannabis, it's completely different. And even with all the global research that they've done, they've shown that what you have is the blood alcohol content. The legal limit in the UK is 0.08% blood alcohol content. What they found with the research is that cannabis, as far as a BAC would go, it's somewhere between 0.01 and less than 0.05%, a lot less than the legal limit for alcohol. So pretty much all people who take cannabis are going to be less than what you would have from drinking 2 pints of beer. So why are those people being prosecuted, and people are allowed to drink the worst drug that you should drive on legally?
It's almost like they want a red light that they can turn on top of everyone's heads to show them who's consumed cannabis in the last week.
Mm.
It's almost like not an impairment test. It's like an acknowledgement test. It's like, have you consumed cannabis in the last 150 hours? You say no. Well, stick this in your mouth and let's see if you're lying. If you're lying, you're going to take away your license, aren't we? It's a little bit, it's mental, because it's not like, are you breaking a law right now? It's, have you broken a law over the past? If you have done, you're about to get in trouble. And I always find that a little bit, I find that a little bit crazy. I just can't really get my head around that. And I was reading your report, and you actually made a couple of beautiful closing statements. The last one was great. The concept that a law exists which leads to a criminal record, fines, and a driving disqualification without any evidence of the defendant being a risk to road safety, impaired whilst driving, whom with the likelihood is practicing their inalienable human right to health by utilizing globally recognized essential medicine, risks jeopardizing the fabric and the integrity of the judicial system, and exposes the 20 incompetence of the police force in being able to gather evidence sufficient to constitute criminal intent. I really liked it. Like, I really liked it, because what it is, it's this idea that the fact that they're even setting up a system which people are guaranteed to fail in, okay, the fact that they've set up a system which enables all of us cannabis users to fail it, any single one of us, okay, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, even if you're a weekend smoker, you will fail if you ever get stopped by the police, and they don't need a reason to swab you. It's a little bit crazy. It's just crazy. I understand now why you always talk about human rights, because it's my girlfriend's human right to not be penalized for the fact that I consume cannabis. But the fact that she can be penalized for my cannabis consumption through secondhand smoke, through trace elements of cannabinoids which are in her system, is insane. It's literally, it's like my actions punish her. It's mental. It's mental. So I understand now why you always.
Do you want to ask me what we're doing about it then?
Yeah, go on.
Do you want
answer
to
that
ask me
question.
what we're doing about it?
You
Because we're nearly out of time, aren't we?
Do it. You got 4 minutes. I'll shut up.
So we were taking that first case to the Court of Appeal, the Crown Court, to appeal the decision that was made in the Magistrates' Court. Unfortunately, the judge was very, well, he basically said, oh, you cannabis people should just take it to Parliament. He was very derogatory, and basically it proved that she wasn't going to get a fair trial. So today, we've cancelled the prospect of an appeal, and we are now planning to take it to a higher court, probably a judicial review, in which we've got a good chance of actually changing the law, because we've got all the evidence to show that it's an unjust, unfair trial, that human rights abuses are happening. So if we take it to the judicial review, hopefully we can get the law reverted back to Section 4, which it was in 2018, where the police have to prove impairment. And that makes everybody safe. So that's the next step. That alongside police training.
There's got to be another type of test which they can put in. I'm all for testing, and I'm all for people who break the law to do it. But I mean, there's got to be something which they can do, which some scientists can invent, a test that actually tells if you've smoked cannabis within the last 5 hours. Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can, but you can't prove impairment. You know, there's a difference between having THC in your blood, in your system, or your saliva, or your hair, or whatever, and being impaired.
True.
Two very different things. The only way of proving impairment is through a field impairment test. And in the research, the only 2 drugs that they've found field impairment tests can be successful with is cannabis, and the one that really makes me laugh quite a bit is ketamine. Because if you've ever seen anybody who's taken ketamine on a recreational basis, they can't even walk or talk, never mind drive. You can imagine the video cam footage of doing a field impairment test with somebody on ketamine, can't you? I know it's not funny because it's bad, but you get where I'm coming from.
1,000,000%. So I completely agree with you, Guy. Listen, every time I read one of your reports, I learn something new, you know, and I understand exactly what you're fighting for. Every time I read one of your reports, I sometimes start off a little bit on the back foot of, all right, what am I about to read? And every time I finish your reports, I always come with the same logical thought process of, I understand why Guy is doing this. I understand he's fighting for people who don't understand that their rights are being jeopardized. And every time you come on this show and every time you send me another report to read, you literally blow my mind. And I want to say thank you on behalf of all of us medicinal, recreational, general cannabis users out there. Thank you for the education. Thank you for having our back. Thank you for fighting for us. Thank you for defending us. And thank you for always being there for us as a community, because, you know, people like you really do give us the strength to kind of see it through to tomorrow. So I just want to say thank you, Guy, on behalf of all of us for everything you've done for us, because it's important that you get the acknowledgement you deserve. That's all we have time for today. I'm sorry if I lost my track a little bit, guys. Thank God we had Guy to kind of keep me on it. It's been an incredible show, and look forward to seeing you all next week. God bless you. Take care.